Then one final thing. On Thursday, there's a very special occasion happening. It is Kathy's birthday. So if we could all just sing happy birthday, and we have a little something for her. Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kathy. Happy birthday to you. And we just have a little something from all of us to you. Thank you, everybody. Open it now.
I want you to know that I am joining the ranks of those people who are considered very valuable. What with silver in their hair and gold in their teeth, stones in their kidneys, and gas in their stomachs. Preacher came to me the other day, said, you need to be thinking about the hereafter. And I said, well, I do all the time, no matter where I am, in the living room, downstairs, in the laundry room, in the kitchen. I ask myself, now what am I hereafter? And the thing I'm really getting worried about, this is a beautiful card, thank you so much, and a gift from Dayton's. I will have fun shopping, thank you. I think the anniversary sale's on, right? Good, great. But I am getting worried. I really am. I'll tell you honestly, all the cards I've gotten, I used to get really funny cards. You know you're over the hill when they don't even send you funny cards anymore. All these nice cards. Like they think you're not going to last another year. Ah. Thank you very much. One mom was putting moisturizer on her face when her little girl asked her what she was doing, and she explained that the cream was good for wrinkles. It's sure doing a good job, Mommy. You got lots of them. Oh, well. I know I laugh at the days to come because my family is helping me in this aging process. This morning, my husband came in after I got here and brought the coffee that I'd left sitting on the counter that I'd poured for myself to bring. And my son showed up, unbeknownst to me, and I had changed purses this morning. He thought I left my purse at home, so he brought the other purse. I think he wanted to be sure he had lunch money. Well, our more precious than jewels mom is an example of how to approach aging and death. And you do not sense in her response, as we look at our text today, you don't sense anything in her response that is filled with fear at all. Instead, there's this wonderful verse that says she can laugh at the days to come. She just has great joy in the daily grind. She could say along with Edith Bregard, you may search my time-worn face. You'll find a merry eye that twinkles. I am not an old lady, just a little girl with wrinkles. Now, I'd like to look at the reasons why today this mom can laugh at the days to come. And I believe there are several. The first one is tied. We have to look at this verse as a whole. So I'm going to read the entire verse for you today again. Last week we talked about the first part of the verse. It says, she is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. As we look at the verse as a whole, one of the reasons that she can laugh at the days to come is because she has a clear conscience. Rejoicing is possible because of this. Because joy is a result of experiencing forgiveness and having your guilt absolved. David writes in Psalm 32:2, and I love this particular rendition of this text. What relief for those who have confessed their sins and God has cleansed their record. There was a time when I would not admit what a sinner I was, but my dishonesty made me miserable and filled my days with frustration. All day and all night your hand was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water on a sunny day until I finally admitted all my sins to you and stopped trying to hide them. I said to myself, I will confess them to the Lord, and you forgave me. All of my guilt is gone. I'll never forget, as a little girl, I played with a boy in the neighborhood, and there was some new housing across the street from us, and we were over there playing, and we liked to get in through the basement window and explore the house. The new construction that was taking place after the workmen had gone home, and they usually left the window just a little bit ajar. In the process of doing that this one day, we broke the window. Little Bobby said to me, "I'm not telling." Okay, I won't tell either. But I was so filled with guilt that finally I broke down and cried and told my father what I had done. He went over, looked at the window, and he said, "Well, we need to go to Bobby's house and tell his parents as well." And I said, "No, he'll kill me." We did. Bobby's parents said, Bobby said he didn't do it, so we don't believe he did it. He won't be responsible. So we went to my father went with me to the construction people, explained what had happened, and they set a price on the window, and I paid for it. You know, the thing I remember about that was the tremendous relief I had in admitting what I had done wrong and making it right. There is a freedom that comes when our guilt is absolved, and most of the time we can't go back and make all the amends that need to be made because we've offended our Father himself. But through the blood of Jesus Christ, as we confess our sins, he brings that tremendous relief and that forgiveness into our lives. Also, strength of character gives rise to incredible freedom. Now, to understand the level of this woman's joy, we must look at the meaning of the word laugh in the Hebrew. Rejoice in the Hebrew actually means to be playful and to make sport. Our mom lived a life with complete abandonment and just a playful spirit. This was only possible because of the internal strength of character that she possessed. Psalm 119, verses 44 through 45, David says, "I will always obey your law forever and ever. I will walk about in freedom because I have sought your precepts." When you do the right thing, there is incredible freedom. You lack fear because you know you have done what is right. So a lot of her laughter just emanates from the fact that she has nothing that she hides, that she's the same here as she is at home. And there's no fear of being found out. There's no fear from what God will do to her, because she knows that she's in right with him. Now, joy also emanates from knowing that God is strong in behalf of the righteous. Do you know that he defends the righteous? Let me just read a few verses to you. 1 Peter 3:12, "For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to his prayer." Psalm 32:18 and 19, "He will keep them from death even in times of famine." Psalm 5:12, "For surely, O Lord, you bless the righteous. You surround them with favor as with a shield." Psalm 34:17, "The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles." Psalms 92:12 through 14, "The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like the cedar of Lebanon, planted in the house of the Lord. They will flourish in the courts of our God. They will bear fruit in old age." I like that part. "They will stay fresh and green." These are just a few of the promises that God has made for those who live lives that are focused on pleasing him. Also, rejoicing is possible because the more precious than jewels mom trusts in God's providence. Job 10:12 says, "You gave me life and showed me kindness, and in your providence you watched over my spirit." Job is saying this after all these disasters have come upon him. Isn't that interesting? Now, the verse 25 says she can laugh in the days to come. The meaning of the word "to come" has two meanings in the Hebrew. The first word is Y-O-W-N, yawn, and it means the present, from sunrise to sunset. She can laugh at today, right now, today. She can rejoice in this moment, this time, right now. But it also means in the days that are coming down the road, to the future. All the future days that are coming to her. Now, why can she do that? Because of the meaning of the word providence. Providence comes from two Latin words. The word pro, you know what that means. It means to come before. Pronoun, the word that comes before the noun. But also, the last part of that word, it comes from the word video, which means to see. Warren Wiersbe says that providence then is the working of God in advance to arrange circumstances and situations for the fulfilling of his purposes. In other words, God sees before and he orchestrates all the circumstances and events of our lives for his purposes in our lives. So she can laugh at the days today, she can laugh at the present, she can laugh at the future days because she knows that God is orchestrating everything for her ultimate benefit and character growth and to bring about his purposes in her life. We know the verse, we say it all the time, Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Now, does this mean that life is easy? No, it does not. In fact, Tim Hansel reminds us that most of the Psalms were written and were born out of difficulty. Most of the epistles that we have, our letters in the New Testament, were written in prisons. Absolutely dungeons, really, when you come to see what they were. Bunyan wrote Pilgrim's Progress in jail. Florence Nightingale, too ill to move from her bed, reorganized the hospitals of England. Semi-paralyzed and under the constant menace of illness, Pasteur was tireless in his attack on disease. And during the greater part of his life, American historian Francis Parkman suffered so acutely that he could not work for more than 5 minutes at a time. His eyesight was so wretched that he could only scrawl a few gigantic words on a manuscript, yet he contrived to write 20 magnificent volumes of history. I wonder if he would have written that if he hadn't had to overcome the difficulties in his life. God knows what we need. He knows exactly what we need. Andrew Murray was bedridden, and a woman who was very distraught came to visit him, and she was not allowed to go see him, so she gave this note to his servant and said, please take this to Reverend Murray, please. And so he carried it up to Murray, and he read the note, and he wrote 4 things on the note to send back to this woman. He said, remember 4 things, please. First, we are in the circumstances we are in by God's appointment. Secondly, all the time we are in those circumstances, we are being cared for and being kept by God. Third, in those circumstances, we are under his training. And fourth, we remain in those circumstances for the time he has allotted. I'd like to add a 5th suggestion to this list. Discover joy in the midst of those circumstances. Recent archaeological discoveries have uncovered letters written by martyrs during those first 3 trying centuries following Christ. Just before death, one saint penned, in a dark hole, I have found cheerfulness. In a place of bitterness and death, I have found rest. While others weep, I have found laughter. Where others fear, I have found strength. Who would believe that in a state of misery, I have had great pleasure? That in a lonely corner, I have had glorious company, and in the hardest bonds, perfect repose. All these things Jesus has granted me. He is with me. He comforts me and fills me with joy. He drives bitterness from me and fills me with strength and consolation. Isn't that an incredible letter written by one of our saints after the crucifixion of Christ as he was awaiting his death in a dungeon? Rejoicing is also, in this woman's life, an outgrowth of knowing that God delights in her. How do I know he delights in us? Well, listen to this. Zephaniah 3:17. He will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. That's what God says about you. Deuteronomy 30, verse 9. The Lord will again delight in you and make you prosperous. Psalm 35:27. May those who delight in my vindication shout for joy and gladness. May they say, the Lord be exalted, who delights in the well-being of his servant. Proverbs 11:20. The Lord detests men of a perverse heart, but he delights in those whose ways are blameless. Back to the righteous woman again. Psalm 147:11, the Lord delights in those who fear him, who put their hope in his unfailing love. Psalm 149:4, for the Lord takes delight in his people. He crowns the humble with salvation. And I love Genesis 6:8-9, because God speaks of Noah and he says, I take great pleasure in Noah. He takes great pleasure in you. You could substitute your name in that verse. He takes great pleasure in you. God knows what we need to become the person that he intends us to become. And he delights in us so much that he provides those situations for us. Now, Psalm 23 is a wonderful psalm of promises to us. And as you read that psalm, we've looked at it from the point of the shepherd. But here's something we didn't look at from the point of the shepherd. It says he restores my soul. As I did this study, I did a little research on this, and actually what happens when a sheep is let out of the holding pen. If you remember, the sheep always go into a holding place in the rocks or somewhere where they're safe for the night from the animals. In the morning, remember that there's a very small opening. Do you remember that? From those of you who were with me for that study, Ordinary but Extraordinary, they would walk through that very small opening one at a time, because they had to make sure it was a small opening so that the shepherd could guard it at night from the wolves. The sheep walk through that small opening and they're single file. And they stay single file. And this is fascinating. They'll stay single file all the way as they walk to the pasture, grazing on the way. As they're walking on their journey, and as it gets hotter in the day, each sheep, one at a time, will get out of their line, and they will walk a little faster and get up close to the shepherd. And they'll rub up against the shepherd. And the shepherd will reach down and pat the sheep on its head and nuzzle its neck, a little bit like what you would do with a puppy or a cat. And then the sheep will just trot back to its place in line. And every sheep will do that. Why? The sheep needs to know that the shepherd delights in him. And when it says he restores my soul, it's talking about what God will do for you as you nuzzle up next to him. He will restore your soul. He pats you on the head and he says, you're doing a good job, Mom. He nuzzles your neck and he says, I love you. I see that you're trying. And then you can go back and you can get on with the day's duties. Isn't that true? How many times do your children do that during the day? They'll stop what they're doing in their play and they'll come up close to you. Mommy, I just want a hug. They need to have their soul restored. God wants to restore your soul. He delights in you. And that's why he does that for you. Becoming a mom. How do we become a mom who can laugh at the days to come? Well, Ortberg contends that joyfulness is a skill that must be learned. I think that joyfulness is inherent in us as a child, and that as adults we get it joyless adults knock it out of us. The reason I say that is because what I observe in the classroom. Last week I was in a first grade classroom, and I had this little boy named Austin. In this classroom were several boys who were ADHD, as the teacher informed me before she left. And by the afternoon, I was sure that most of them had not taken their medication, or at least that it had worn off. Little Austin was a case in point. This little boy was so exuberant. He could hardly contain his exuberance for life. He bounced from table to table and just wrestled joyfully with anyone who would wrangle with him, any willing partner at all. And he just radiated life. He was not uncooperative, and he would willingly, I'd say, Austin, you need to go take a time out, go put your head down. Little Austin would trundle over to his little table, he'd put his head down, peek up at me with his little eye, and then he would, 2 minutes later, he would be up again, bouncing around the room, twirling. He just was trying to engage his others in the joy of just being Austin. I think children have inherent joy. But somehow along the path of life, we just kind of lose it bit by bit, don't we? Well, I'm going to encourage you to find joy today. Well, how do you do that? Well, first of all, the first point goes back to the very first point that we talked about today. Cultivate your character by following God's laws. Develop a character of integrity. All of nature depends on hidden resources. We know that from looking at the tree. The tree would not exist except for the deep roots that go deep into the ground, that draw up the water and the minerals into its system, into its branches and its leaves. Rivers have their sources where? In the snow-capped mountains where you can't see them. They draw on their life from way, way up where you cannot ever see the source that they have. The most important part of our lives is what people can't see. What you do when nobody is looking is what's the most important part of what you are becoming. Develop integrity in those hidden places of your life. Make the right choices when you're out of sight and you're hidden away, and you will grow roots that will sustain you through storms and drought and kids climbing all over you, and you can keep laughing. Secondly, learn to appreciate the ordinary. Develop a spirit of gratitude. Helen Keller was blind and deaf from childhood. In this illness, she learned what brings real joy. She said, someone asked her, if you only had 3 days that you could see, what would you want to see? She said this, on the first day, I would want to see people whose kindness and companionship had made her life worth living. She would call in on all of her friends and look long at their faces. She would look into the face of a baby. She would like to see the many books that had been read to her and look into the eyes of her dogs, faithful and loyal. And she would take a long walk in the woods. On the second day, she would get up early to see the dawn. She would visit an art museum to probe man's soul by studying his pictures and sculptures. Then at night, she would visit the theater to see the grace of the great ballerina Pavlova. And on the last day, she would be up again to see the dawn, to discover new revelations of its beauty. And then she would visit the haunts of men where they work. She would stand on the busy street corner trying to understand something of the daily lives of people by looking into their faces and reading what was written there. She would also want to see suffering and feel compassion. She would like to tour New York, see the slums, the factories, the parks, and the children at play. And on the last evening, she wanted to see a funny play, to appreciate the overtones of comedy in the human spirit. Every one of those things are ordinary. Ordinary things that we can enjoy every single day. And yet how many of us appreciate them? Because we see them all the time. If you only had 3 days to see, what would you see? I would see a toddler that I wrapped in a towel, freshly bathed from a bath. That was one of the most delightful things to me, to take that toddler out of the tub. They smelled so good, and wrap them around and hug them close. I would see a baby cooing at my breast as it nursed. I would see my son hovering over me as he wakens me as I'm dozing at 11:30 at night, and he says to me, Mom, I know Dad's not home, but you can rest easy now because I'm here. There are so many little delights in life. Learn to appreciate them. And learn to be grateful for what you have. Develop a spirit of contentment. I like what David Owen writes. William I, who conquered England some 930 years ago, was stupefyingly rich by the standard of his time, yet he had nothing remotely resembling a flush toilet. No paper towels, no lawnmower. How did he get by? History books are filled with wealthy people who were practically destitute compared to me, he says. I have triple-tracked storm windows. Croesus did not. Entire nations trembled before Alexander the Great, but he couldn't buy cat food in bulk. Tsar Nicholas II lacked a compound miter saw. Given how much better off I am than so many famous dead people, you'd think I'd be content. The trouble is that I, like my prosperity with that of living purses, neighbors, high school classmates, TV personalities. The covetousness I feel toward my friend Howard's new kitchen is not mitigated by the fact that no French monarch ever had a refrigerator with glass doors. There is really no rising or falling standard of living, he says, over the centuries, people simply find different stuff to feel grumpy about. You'd think that merely not having the bubonic plague would put us in a good mood. But no, we want a hot tub too. Next, don't take yourself too seriously. Develop some perspective on life. Happy is the person who can laugh at himself because he will never cease to be amused. When disaster happens, have a good laugh and chalk it up to adventure. A pastor by the name of Robert Fulghum shares this anecdote from his memories of his weddings performed. I'm afraid that we can't share our anecdotes from weddings because it would, too many people know us. But this I can share, and it's a wonderful anecdote. It was the wedding of the century with 24 bridesmaids and groomsmen. Everything was going off without a hitch to the joy of the mother of the bride. And the bride. She had been dressed for hours, if not days. No adrenaline was left in her body. Left alone with her father in the reception hall of the church, while the March of the Maidens went on and on and on. She walked along the tables laden with gourmet goodies and absent-mindedly sampled first the little pink and yellow green mints. Then she picked through the silver bowls of mixed nuts and ate the pecans, followed by a cheese ball or two, some black olives, a handful of glazed almonds, a little sausage with a frilly toothpick stuck in it, a couple of shrimps blanketed in bacon, and a cracker piled with liver pate. To wash this down, a glass of pink champagne. Her father gave it to her to calm her nerves. What you noticed as the bride stood in the doorway of the aisle of the church was not her dress, but her face. White. For what was coming down the aisle was a living grenade with the pin pulled out. Just as she walked by her mother, the bride threw up. And by threw up, I don't mean a polite little ladylike erp into her handkerchief. She puked. There's no nice word for it. I mean, she hosed the front of the chancel, hitting 2 bridesmaids, the groom, a ring bearer, and me, the pastor. Only 2 people were seen smiling. One was the mother of the groom, and the other was the father of the bride. But the best part of this story is that they kept their perspective and didn't take themselves too seriously. In fact, they celebrated this wedding to remember 10 years later by inviting the whole guest list again. And the main entertainment was the video event of the actual event shown on 3 TVs as recorded that day by 3 video recorders by 3 different perspectives: rear, side, and front. Not long ago, Dr. Cabasa, the University of Chicago, studied the relationship between health and happiness. And she found that people who do not know how to take care of a situation that comes up are more likely to get sick. And she analyzed the lives of 350 businessmen, for example, and learned that when a businessman did not mind the problems that confronted him each day, he was also more likely to be well. He would rarely stay home from work because of sickness. But for the man or woman who was made miserable every time something different came up unexpectedly, sickness was a way of life, and they coped with stress by becoming sick. Healthy people, says Dr. Cabasa, are those who not only handle problems well, but almost relish them. Healthy people welcome the challenge that comes from life. For them, problems are more like adventures rather than discouraging events. Do you look forward to the problems and challenges that come into your life every day with your kiddies? Then, the next thing we need to do to become a woman who can laugh at the days to come is to learn to enjoy this moment. That is wisdom. You do not know how many moments you have left. So learn to enjoy this moment. My friend Sharon, who just died about a month and a half ago, knew how to enjoy life. Back when she died, she had caramel under her arm for an ice cream sundae. Now that's what I call enjoying life. How precious are the moments? To realize the value of 1 year, ask a student who's failed his exam. To realize the value of 1 month, ask a mother who's given birth to a premature baby. To realize the value of 1 week, ask an editor of a weekly newspaper. To realize the value of 1 day, ask a daily wage earner. To realize the value of 1 hour, ask the lovers who are waiting to meet. To realize the value of 1 minute, ask a person who has missed their plane. And to realize the value of 1 second, ask a person who has survived an accident. And to realize the value of 1 millisecond, ask the person who won a silver medal instead of a gold in the Olympics. Treasure every single moment you have. Dance like no one is watching. This came over the internet one day and I just couldn't resist downloading it because it just said exactly how we need to live. We convince ourselves that life will be better after we get married, have a baby, and then another. Then we're frustrated that the kids aren't old enough and we'll be more content when they are. After that, we're frustrated that when we have teenagers to deal with. We'll certainly be happy when they're out of that stage. We tell ourselves that our life will be complete when our spouse gets his or her act together. When we have a nicer car or able to go on a nicer vacation, or when we retire. And the truth is, there's no better time to be happy than right now. If not now, when? Your life will always be filled with challenges. It's best to admit this to yourself and decide to be happy anyway. One of my favorite quotes comes from Alfred de Souza, who said, "For a long time it seemed to me that life was about to begin." You know, real life. But there was always some obstacle in the way, something to be gotten through first, some unfinished business, time still to be served and a debt to be paid. Then life would begin. At last, it dawned on me. These obstacles were my life. This perspective has helped me see that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. So treasure every moment that you have, and treasure it more because you shared it with someone special, special enough to spend your time with, and remember that time waits for no one. So stop waiting until you finish school, until you go back to school, until you lose 10 pounds, until you have kids, or until you have more kids, or until your kids leave the house, or until you start work again, or until you retire, or until you get married, or until you get divorced, or until Friday night, or until Sunday morning, or until you get a new car or a new house, or until your home is paid for, your car is paid for, until spring or next summer, until next winter, until the 1st or the 15th, until your song comes on the radio. Until. Happiness is a journey, not a destination. Then practice joy. Develop a spirit of cheerfulness. In fact, in the text, when you look at the word laugh, it has so settled into her spirit that she has what we would call a cheerful countenance and spirit. A 92-year-old man went to the doctor to get a physical. A few days later, the doctor saw this man walking down the street with a gorgeous young lady on his arm. A couple days later, the doctor talked to the man and says, "Boy, you're really doing great, aren't you?" The man replied, "Just doing what you said, doctor. Got a hot mama and be cheerful." The doctor said, "I didn't say that. I said, you got a heart murmur. Be careful." Well, I want you to know, pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. According to Tim Hansel, pain is inevitable, misery is optional. The prison that Paul was confined in, as he wrote to us all these wonderful epistles that we have, these letters, was really a dungeon. There is a single hole if you go to visit there, you will find this out. There is a single hole that allows a bit of light to filter in through the cold, damp stone. Having no heat at all, dampness permeates the body, and even in any weather, it is cold. The cell itself does not allow any man to stand upright, so he is limited to sitting, lying, or stooping. Yet Paul's letters are filled with triumphant verbs indicating a motivated, joyful, exuberant life. Verbs like I kept the faith, I finished the course, I fought, I endured. Even though he suffered while terminally ill with leukemia, Archbishop Terence Cardinal Cook emphasized the meaning of life, and in his last pastoral letter he wrote, "The gift of life, God's special gift, is no less beautiful when it is accompanied by illness or weakness or hunger or poverty or mental or physical handicaps, loneliness or old age or preschoolers." I put that in. Indeed, at these times, human life gains extra splendor as it requires our special care, our concern, our reverence. And then last of all, look forward to all that God has for you tomorrow. Live a life of faith. Did you know the world is extremely joyful or extremely interesting to a joyful soul? Lewis Smead said, "To miss out on joy is to miss out on the very reason for your existence." Remember, Jesus kept saying, "I come that your joy may be full." If we don't rejoice today, we're not going to rejoice at all. If we wait until conditions are perfect, we will be waiting until we die. If we're going to rejoice, it must be this day. This is the day that the Lord has made. This is the D-Da day, says John Ortberg. Kenneth Caraway reminds us there is no box made by God, but that the sides can be flattened out and the top blown off to make a dance floor on which to celebrate life. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for life. We are alive, we are here, no matter what the circumstances each of us find ourselves in. We want to live each day like it is a D-Da day, like it is a day filled with the joy that Austin exhibited as he twirled around. Father, you fill us with joy, we know that, but help us to practice joy in the everyday moments and to appreciate each one that you have given us and all the simple, ordinary things like the wonderful sunshine today. In Jesus' name, amen. You have a great week.